それであんたもやるのかい
Kengan Ashura. This show caught my eye with the CG when I'd opened Netflix a long time ago. I swear it was always the first thing on the homepage every time I opened it. I finally caved in one day, and now I love the show. I'll start with the main reason someone wouldn't watch it, which is the 3D CG animation. After a few episodes, the CG didn't bother me anymore. I used to think CG was bad in anime 100% of the time, but I've changed my mind throughout the years. I think CG in anime has gotten good enough now, so I don't mind it as much. Some of the best CG I've seen recently was Trigun Stampede and the Slam Dunk movie. Would Arcane count as 3D? I'm not sure how they specify what animation style that is, so Arcane if that counts. They look perfectly fine to me. You could argue that having zero CG and just going 2D animation is always better, which I would mostly agree with, but that's a topic for another time. Kengan Ashura's CG isn't perfect, but I think it's good enough. It's best when the fighting starts. I'm even hesitant to say I like it a little better than if it was just 2D animated. I think I can feel the weight and impact of the attacks better with the CG. It might also be the CG and the sound effects that each hit has. It makes the fighting feel like it has more weight to it. You get to see the camera shake and holding the shot longer when a big hit happens. So combining all these things, I would say the CG is good for the fights. Now, when they're standing around, it does look iffy, but overall I don't hate it. They do mix up using 2D and CG animation throughout the show. It took me a couple of episodes to realize they were doing this. It's an interesting stylistic choice. The animators just have some scenes in 2D, and they did a good job at blending it in with the 3D CG, so when they switch from both, it's pretty seamless. Another stylistic choice was making the character backstories do this slideshow thing. I don't know the name of it, I'm sure it has one, but I also like it. Calling it a slideshow makes it sound bad, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Even if it turns out they had budget issues, so they had to do it like this, I think it's a good enough alternative. Now, with the feelings about the CG out the way, let's get to the plot. It's about to be the start of the next Kengan tournament, where big business leaders hire fighters to 1v1 single-elim fights in a tournament. Yamashita is told to enter the tournament as his own made-up company to help the company he works for to have a higher chance of winning. Yamashita stumbles upon Ohma Tokita, fighting the fighter that was supposed to represent his company, and Ohma just beats him easily. Ohma gets hired to be Yamashita's fighter, and the rest of the story is literally just fighting. It is a bit more complex with personal grudges and company scheming, but this is the main draw to the show. How the show is structured is when the show gets to the tournament, it's literally just fight after fight. Each fight is about 1 or 2 episodes long, maybe 3, and it just rolls through them. There's usually no downtime after each fight until the whole block is finished. There are 4 blocks of the tournament, blocks A, B, C, and D. Some actual story plot happens in between rounds, but yeah, I love that it's just fights nonstop. Let's get into the fun part of the video, why I love the show. First, the fights are unpredictable. Each character has their own strengths and weaknesses, gimmicks. The show does a really good job of making you think someone has the upper hand. It usually does it for both fighters, so it's hard to predict who will win the fight. I will give the author, Yabako Sandrovich, assuming it's a good adaptation of the manga, I'll give him huge props. He sets up characters that want to fight each other before the tournament begins. It makes you think they obviously have to fight each other in the tournament, so they can't lose a fight until they get to each other. Surprisingly, some of those setups don't happen because they lose their fight before they get to fight the person they want to. There are still other fighters there that are really strong that they have to get past, which they sometimes don't. I give high praise to the author for doing that. It subverts expectations, so you don't truly know who will win each fight. I was so confused when this happened. I didn't know where the story was going, if this person wasn't going to get to fight this other person, since it was set up. I assume some of these matches will happen in Kengan Omega. Hopefully that gets animated next. I have no idea what Kengan Omega is about, so maybe I'm wrong about that. It's gonna sound dumb, but even for the main character Ohma, I was convinced that there was a chance that he would lose his matches multiple times. I sound dumb for thinking that, but again, the author did an excellent job of keeping it ambiguous, and I can't praise it enough. I also love that pretty much every character that is entered in the tournament gets their dedicated fight episodes. It doesn't skim past a fight just to get back to Ohma's fight. Most of the shows that do tournaments just skip past any fight that isn't a main focus. If it's not the protagonist, antagonist, protagonist friend, antagonist, henchman, then they usually skip the fights with randoms, which makes sense if the plot isn't about the tournament. Kengan Ashura shows all the fights because that's the main plot of the show. Why not show every fight and give all the fighters an interesting fight? It keeps the show fresh, having us wonder how the next fight will play out with these different characters. Side rant. This is, I would have liked this studio to be the ones that did Record of Ragnarok, but you know, that's just me. Alright, the next thing. The show is just absurd enough. It's realistic enough. I'm pretty sure the techniques are mostly accurate to real life. I'm mainly talking about the fighting styles, not all the quirks that the characters get. The characters are human enough that everyone will go down with enough damage. The characters are and aren't superhuman. They have superhuman abilities, but enough punches to the head will make everyone go down. So it's somewhat an even playing field. The weird abilities that each character has makes the fights more fun. The show changes from the first rounds to the later rounds. In the first rounds, we learn each character's abilities, what their specialty is, how they fight. Do they just charge in? Do they wait and plan moves? We learn who the character is and how they fight in the first round. During the first few rounds, you start rooting for these other fighters. As the show goes on, you want to root for this random fighter that won't win in the end because we have an MC, but excited to see how far they can go. It changes in the second round, because we know what all the characters are capable of, and now we get to see how this new matchup goes. As the rounds progress, all the characters have to keep pushing past their limits to get the win, so it stays exciting. Alright, let's get into some of the characters. Ohma. Ohma isn't the most interesting protagonist. He's the classic stoic dude, no emotions, doesn't care about anything, just wants to win. There's more to him, but that's what you get most of the time. Not really his fault, he was an orphan that did nothing but fight his whole life. Yamashita is supposed to be the counterbalance to him. He's the second protagonist, or arguably, the main protagonist. He's opposite of Ohma, caring, scared of everything, not a fighter. He's pretty much the audience insert. He expresses the emotions we have to all the crazy things he's seeing in the tournament. Ohma gets better in the second half of the show, character-wise. He grows a little, showing more emotion as he remembers his past. So by the end of the show, I was more invested in him as a character. I also want to talk about Cosmo Imai. Cosmo is probably my favorite character on the show. He's called the King of Stranglers. I like his growth through the fights. He's one of the new young fighters that has the enthusiasm and a little overconfident, as he should be. He's kind of an underdog, but he's won like 20 matches and no losses. His growth during the matches were compelling. He's never been in a situation where he was close to losing, which helped him unlock more of his potential. I was rooting for Cosmo, even though he's not the MC. It was fun to root for him while I could. I guess I should also talk about the Fang, Akito Kano. There isn't really a villain or antagonist of the show. I guess the antagonist is just all the other fighters. Fang is the undefeated champion of the Kengan tournaments. He's the chairman's fighter, who is the leader of the association. I think I forgot to mention whoever wins the tournament becomes the new chairman. He's been the chairman for so long since nobody can defeat the Fang. I just call him Fang and not Agito. Fang is cool. His gimmick is that once he's seen a move he hasn't seen before, he adapts to it very quickly. Special moves like only work once or twice on him. He's not really present in the story since there are other main plots happening. Ohma doesn't really have any conflict with him, so he doesn't have a lot of screen time for us to care more about him. His fights are still fun to watch since everyone who goes against him all think they have a good chance to win. His fights still have high stakes since, like I said before, the author is really good at making it seem like each fighter has a chance to win. Like most of the characters, Fang becomes more interesting in the later half of the show.
適応して超越してやる。それが滅道の牙だ。
Let's get to my favorite fights. The first one that has just stuck with me through all the years that I always remember is probably my favorite, well, yeah, probably my favorite fight, is Cosmo vs. Akoya. Akoya is basically Peacemaker if he was a cop. I don't know Peacemaker's background. I just know he's a crazy guy that wants to bring peace, but he does it in an extreme way. Akoya does that with justice. His sense of justice is if you do anything wrong, you must pay. Most of the time it's death. He's a psychopath. He will kill people if they get in his way of justice.
それでいつまでこんなことを一度休んで考えてみたらどう？
少子正義に休息など不要。戦い続けるさ。悪を根絶やしにするその日まで。
He has a weird relationship with his company president. She has the ability to figure out a person's breathing patterns, so they cheat. She gives him info on when to attack based on how the opponent breathes. At first you think that's his main way of fighting, winning fights, because when she finishes analyzing the opponent's breathing patterns, it's an easy win for him. We find out later that she is the one holding him back from killing his opponents. His true power is just being insane and killing people, so when she doesn't give him the information on time, he goes into killing mode.
止血しろ。お前はまだ死んではならない。お前は身をもって知るのだ。正義とは核あるべきと。
All this to say, his fight with Cosmo was the most brutal one to me. I always remember this move where he's torturing Cosmo by stabbing his thumbs in Cosmo's ribs over and over again, and he's holding Cosmo's mouth shut so he can't forfeit the match. That's always just sticks with me whenever I remember this show.
気を失ったか。気を失うことは許さん。肋骨は12対。すなわちあと23本ある。徐々に理解していけ。正義のあり方を。苦痛の死をもってお前の罪は浄化され、善なる魂へと昇華されるのだ。さあ2本目だ。
Another fight that I really liked was Kaneda versus Gaolan, or Gaolan. Real quick, I have no idea what his name is supposed to be. In the first half of the show, they say Gaolan. Then in the second half, they call him Gaolan. I googled his name, and in the wiki, they say Gaolan. But in the manga, they say Gaolan. And I'll just go with the manga and call him Gaolan, or Gao for short. I don't know how there's confusion about his name, but I'll just go with it. I just like this fight because it's pretty unique in the show. Kaneda is an interesting character. He's not really a fighter. He's just a smart dude that wanted to test out his skills against stronger people. It's a little iffy because his main strategy is to be a punching bag until he finishes downloading how his opponents fight. He can basically see a few seconds into the future, and once he does that, he can actually fight back. My only problem with that is that he's a tiny dude compared to the other fighters, so it's hard to believe he's tanking so many hits from them. It does explain it kind of, that he's like turning a little bit when he gets hit and mitigating the damage a little bit. That aside, his fight with Gaolan was good. Gaolan is a world champion boxer, also known as the Thai God of War. I like the super underdog giving a world champion boxer a run for his money. Gaolan underestimates him in the fight, which leads him to taking more damage than he should have. I like that it wasn't a free win because they showed Kaneda win against a strong fighter to get into the tournament. This is a good example of why I love the show. Both of these characters have a compelling setup before their match. Kaneda wants to see how far he can go with his strategies. Gaolan is set up to fight Saw Pang later. So it's a toss up on who will win since both of them have a good reason to win. And it does this for all the characters. I'll do one more favorite fight. Gaolan versus Fang. I will spoil the end of this fight, so heads up. This is a fight I found out I loved after watching the show for this video. This is now this might be my favorite fight now of the show. Gaolan versus Fang was hype as hell. Fang starting the fight trying to match Gaolan in boxing, them dodging each other's attacks, both waiting for the right moment to get a good hit in. Fang has the size advantage, so he can tank more hits from Gaolan. Fang can't quite match up to Gaolan's boxing, so he moves to a style he's more comfortable with. We get the reveal that Gaolan's main martial art is where he combines Muay Thai and boxing. Another great example of the fights being so hard to tell who will win. It should be obvious Fang will win since he's set up to be the strongest fighter, but here he is struggling with Gaolan. Gaolan is the world's strongest boxer, so it should be a hard fight, even for the Fang. Fang does end up winning the match after a great showing from both of them.
Gaolan 恩沢と貴様を打撃で凌駕するほど最後まで叶わなかった。
But after the fight is also why I love it. He's not satisfied with his win. He couldn't surpass Gaolan's boxing with his boxing. He had to actually use tactics to win the fight instead of just overpowering the opponent. This is why I said most of the characters get better in the second half of the show. This is the first time we get to see Fang as more than a one-note character. He has an internal conflict that we get to see. He's not just the big, strong guy we have to beat. We saw during the fight his personality come out, and it also came out in this after-fight introspection. And he gets better development as the show goes on.
つわものゆえの葛藤ですじゃ。今日までアゲトは圧倒的な実力のみで勝利を重ねてきた。しかし、ガオラン・ウォンサワットを制するために駆け引きを用いざるを得なかった。あの子はそれを卑怯と考えておるのじゃろう。
There are so many more fights that I would like to go over, but obviously I can't just go through every single fight in the show, so I'll leave that up to you to hopefully go and watch it if you haven't seen it. In the end, I want to give Kengan Ashura a 9 or a 10 out of 10. I rate things on how much I enjoyed it, so I really liked it, so I give it a high score. It's set up to do a good tournament story, and I think it excelled at it. I thought I was just going to get a basic meathead fighting show, which is what I wanted from the show, but it executed everything so well that it passed my expectations. It's hard to predict who will win a fight, which is great. There are interesting side plots, lots of twists and turns. I didn't even touch the Kiryu and Ohma plotline, but I wanted to keep it somewhat spoiler-free. And the author does something that I always boost the score for when an author does this, is when the story sets up something, basically a Chekhov's gun. Like in One Piece, Oda sets up Law can do immortality surgery, but he'd die if he did it. If Oda follows through with it and doesn't find a way to let Law live while giving someone immortality, most likely to Luffy, then I have a lot of respect when authors follow through with the setup. Kengan Ashura sets up something early on and continues to remind us what will happen throughout the show, so when it finally happened, I had so much respect for the show to do it. It almost took the easy way out, but it committed to it, and I have to give it praise. The only thing that I have a mixed feeling about is the fights later. The fighters aren't at full power since it's just fight after fight. There's little time to heal, so it's fair to say some of the outcomes could have changed if both fighters were in peak form. The injuries from previous fights impact the current fight, which is cool since it makes every fight have impact, but I also would have liked to see each match in peak form. That's why I'm a little mixed on that choice, but it's not a big deal. Anyway, I got what I wanted from the show. I wanted fights, and I got fights. I also got a bit more that pushed the show up for me. If you haven't seen Kengan Ashura, hopefully I was convincing enough to make you want to watch it. If you were watching the screen the whole time, I hope by now the CG has grown on you, that you could see past it and give it a chance. I don't know how popular the show is, since that would be a mega turnoff to most people. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's 52 episodes of fighting. There is probably like 3 of the 52 episodes that has no fighting. Honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if it was less than that. All the episodes might have a fight in them. I'm not too sure, actually. I keep referencing Kengan Omega. I haven't looked into what it's about. I'm hoping it's a continuation of this, but I have no idea. I'll probably read it. Hopefully Netflix funds Kengan Omega. I'd be fine with them using the same studio. And that's it.
もう一度聞くぜ。あんたもやるのかい？はい、やりましょう。
だから絶対無事に戻ってきてください。